In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Course Educa, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. Sometimes it takes breaking down to truly heal. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin. Today we're diving into the power of healing through adversity, the intersection of holistic wellness and personal transformation, and how faith and discipline creates a foundation for lasting health. Our guest today is Mike Beverly, founder of Worldwide Cellular Health and author of Hardcore, Discovering the Strength to Love and Forgive After Entering Strife and Dysfunction. Mike's journey spans music educations, entrepreneurships, and holistic wellness mentorship. After surviving a major health crisis in 2020, he dedicated his life to helping others reclaim vitality through nutrition, movement, and mindset. From the classroom to coaching, his story reflects resilience, faith, and the transformative power of self-care and forgiveness. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let the world know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. Your support helps more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Mr. Mike Beverly, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic, Sam. Thank you for having me.
It's lovely having you here. You actually come from a lovely trusted contact of mine, and we hit it off with the first conversations and thought your story was definitely worth sharing. So to kick us off, please tell us more about Worldwide Cellular Health.
Well, Worldwide Cellular Health is a brand that I created over a couple of years after going through a major health crisis and really for decades just ignoring my health, having a horrible diet, having really a poor lifestyle, and was, for all intents and purposes, a borderline alcoholic or alcoholic, just drinking too much.
Okay.
And abusing that. And when I had a major health crisis in March of 2020, and literally could have almost, it felt like I was in a major health crisis when they carried me out of my home on a gurney, and I saw the fright in my wife's eyes. I knew that I was in trouble, and then I didn't know for a year that the prescription medication that triggered that health crisis, a prescription blood thinner, was so dangerous it had to be taken off the market because it had caused so many fatalities. Wow. So that led me into a period of anger, and then a period of I have to be proactive and help people realize they cannot just assume that if a doctor prescribes anything, regardless of what it is, just accept it on blind faith. You must be proactive. You must ask, what are the side effects? Well, what are the ramifications in my human anatomy that this could have? And so I started a podcast, started writing different newsletters and articles about alternative and natural wellness. And not to say that I'm condemning traditional Western medicine. We've all benefited from it, but on the other hand, it almost killed me.
Sure.
So that made me a proactive warrior, and I thought, well, I know health comes at the cellular level, and I want to tell everybody in the world about this, so thus the name Worldwide Cellular Health.
Beautiful. I want you to take us back to the very beginning of that journey, because obviously you have a few decades under your belt, which is great. You cannot buy experience. Experience is wisdom, perhaps. And you start everything perhaps with music, right? You were part of a band for quite a long time, and actually you spent over a decade basically there, and really shaping, I suppose, young musicians and watching disciplines and repetition, I suppose, forge a confidence, right? What I always tell about confidence, which I took from Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. There's a whole formula on confidence. If you guys want to take a look at it, is truly confidence is breed by competence and repeat proof of such competence. So perhaps there's something sacred about leading a group from silence to harmony. And I really want to sort of hear you speak about the fact that what parallels do you draw between your time teaching musics and your work now as a wellness coach and author, perhaps? How does those years shape your leaderships and your understanding of what's necessary to convey the right message?
Well, just like the discipline that it took me to become a professional musician and the discipline it took the students that I taught to go from not even knowing how to read music or how to hold an instrument to being highly competent in both of those, it takes daily disciplines. And just like today, and with my messaging, I literally, believe it or not, I literally spent 6 hours yesterday doing the final edits on my new book, The Healing Divide. And that was motivated as well because the more I learned about traditional Western medicine and how the uneducated or uninformed, that's probably a better word, uninformed consumers of that, especially prescription medications, people that are uninformed and not knowing about the side effects or the harms and why they just accept it with blind faith. So the book is entitled The Healing Divide. The subtitle is Why We Resist Alternative and Natural Healing Modalities. That's the subtitle.
Okay.
And again, people say, what do you like best about what you've done? I said, well, what I have been blown away by is what I've learned in researching the impact, the influence that Big Pharma has had on not just U.S. society, but world society in their thinking. Whereas, an herb you might grow in the backyard that could help heal maybe a cold sore, or whatever it might help you with naturally. Big Pharma and society and the programming is that's dangerous. Don't do that. That's dangerous. And so that will be coming out in my book, and it's pretty much done. It'll be hopefully on Amazon by August 1st, and I believe we'll hit that deadline.
Beautiful. I suppose there's 1,000 things that comes to mind, but I think it was Hans Christian Andersen that was talking about the fact that when words fail, music speaks. Right, music is the universal language. Right. And actually, one of my favorites band of all time, and actually came from my dad, is the Doors. And there's this great quote. I actually have it on many of the platform that I have, which is "Music is your only friend until the end," and which is a little bit more cynical on that one, but still I think is a great quote. From your perspective, do you still practice music? I suppose, how much is that part of your life even to this day?
I do more singing than I do performing. My primary instrument is saxophone. So someone asked me recently, I did a speech at our local Toastmasters about my upbringing as a music teacher and professional. And a lot of people ask me if I still play, and I go, yes, at all my grandchildren. We have 8 grandchildren, and I play at all their birthday parties. So it's kind of cool. They look for Grandpa on that saxophone every birthday. So that's fun. But I do. My wife really kind of laughs at me. I'm actually a pretty good singer. So I'll go downstairs singing that song. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. So, and it's funny. And I'll end up by saying, and I've got a wonderful feeling, everything's going my way. So she'll laugh when I get down to the kitchen, at the coffee pot. So it's kind of music's in my soul and has been for a long, long time.
Beautiful. I want to talk to you about your concept. You talk about this at Great Lines as entrepreneurship as a lifestyle and not just sort of a label, perhaps. Obviously, you learned business from your father, from my understanding, and watching your father obviously build a business and yourself running side hustle and seeing perhaps that could give you more freedom than being than the teacher's salary. And from that perspective, I suppose, if you could be, and this will be a little bit of an intimate question perhaps, but I know you'll give a great answer to this, but what did your father teach you about business that schools and books never could, perhaps? What was the greatest insights you got from watching him?
From watching him, I could watch him meet a perfect stranger, and within less than 5 minutes, they were best friends. And it came from him asking questions. And some of the questions were just mundane, simple questions. How are your children doing? What did you have for dinner? Very, very simple things. And when I say he taught me, this was a gentleman that was so dirt poor. I grew up in a miner's shack in the mountains of Virginia. Wow. And when I say miner's shack, my first home was built with railroad ties and dynamite boxes. That was the home I grew up with. And we were very poor, and my father didn't make much money doing what he did. So on the weekends, he would have to sell apples in what we call hollers in Southwest Virginia and Kentucky, but that was another name for hollows, the little nooks and crannies up mountains where people lived literally with houses on the side of a hill. And so my father and I, when I was 4 or 5 years old, we would get in my grandfather's pickup truck that had wood rail slats on the side with apples in the back of that, because I grew up on an apple farm. And we would take those apples, he would put them in a little basket, carry them up to the house, and he would never say, "Are you interested in buying apples?" He would say, "How's everything going? Did you guys have a good day? How are you I see you have several children out there in the backyard. What ages are your children?"
Mm.
And he had a series of questions, primarily because he was interested in them. And he would go through that, and then all of a sudden I watched this magic happen. The lady of the house or the man of the house would say, "What kind of apples are you selling, mister?" And he'd say, "Well, we're selling this golden delicious or red delicious apples." And they'd say, "Well, how much is that basket?" He'd say, 50 cents. Now, this was in the late 50s.
Right. 50 cents nowadays, I think you don't even get one apple. Or
Oh, well, you wouldn't even get it. I don't even think one apple, really.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I watched him do that, Sam. And so my son and my daughter-in-law watched me in a business meeting one time. And she said, "Grandpa, you could charm the socks off of everybody in this room. How do you do that?" I said, "I learned from a master." And I told her that story. So on his 90th birthday, in tribute to my dad, I had a little basket of apples. And I'm telling the story and how he and I used to do that when I was a little boy. And I said, my daughter-in-law asked me how I could grab the rapport of so many people so quickly. And I said, well, I learned that if I ask questions about them that put all of the focus and emphasis on them to add more value to their lives, that I could get anything I wanted as long as they knew that I cared about them and I was concerned about them first. And I said, I learned that from my father before I ever heard of the name Dale Carnegie.
Mm,
You know,
very nice.
I watched him do that, and I don't know how he learned it. I don't know. I think it was just an innate. He liked people. People loved him. Um, many of his customers, because the rest of that story was, here he was, very poor, working on a farm where his father couldn't afford to pay him. You know, we had the luxury of living on the farm, so we had chickens and pigs and cows and, you know, all that. So we had all that, and we had vegetables that we grew on the farm, but there was no money. I mean, we could never go on a trip, nothing like that. Um, but one of the ladies that he ended up selling some apples to on her front porch ended up being a cafeteria manager in an elementary school.
Okay.
And he was visiting her, taking her some apples one weekend. And she said, look, could you start bringing apples to our school? We give apples to the kids every Friday, and we don't particularly like the people we've been getting them from, and your apples are better. Could you start bringing them to the school? He said, sure. A few months later, she said, well, the produce, the tomatoes, the lettuce, the things we're getting from our produce people is always stale. Would you be able to do that? So he started doing a little research, found out some farmers markets where he could get those products. And Sam, within a year and a half, he was bringing in a 6-figure income because he was supplying all the schools
Nice.
in that area. And it all came from a conversation on a lady's front porch in the hills of Eastern Kentucky.
Beautiful. Within that transition for you, Mike, of obviously from being a teacher to entrepreneurships, how did you apply perhaps that mindset when you were in that transition? Perhaps tell me a few tangible examples where you were able to apply to your own story this sort of masterful relationship building, because as we know, and this is a little bit cliche, but it's still true, we buy from people that we know, like, and trust. So that's just the very basic of where our sales begin. So tell me how you were able to do that for yourself.
Well, the one thing about being an entrepreneur, I guess because of I'd always had several. I mean, I don't know if they had in Canada a newspaper called the Grit newspaper. Did you ever? Okay.
I didn't, but I'm so young. Maybe it existed.
Yeah,
Possible.
maybe it did. It maybe did. It was it was for rural communities that didn't have newspapers.
Okay.
So from the time I was like 8 or 9 years old, I was the Grit paper boy. It was a 7-cent weekly newspaper, and I would get 200 of them every week, and I would deliver them to my customers. I mean, I'm either on my bike or walking in this rural community to do those, and I made 2 cents a paper.
Okay.
So, so that was my first entrepreneurial experience.
It's pretty cool.
Then when I started being a music teacher, I was playing professionally every weekend, and I ended up, I guess, you know, even though that was not an entrepreneurial business, it was a source of income. I earned more playing professionally on the weekends than I did teaching music all week. And then everywhere I lived, from Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and then ultimately Florida, I had a side gig going on, doing something, from, you know, working with the Amway business when I was a teacher, to doing other things. And then I was able to sell some books through a publishing company one summer in between school, and did that literally door to door in Houston, Texas. And I've never felt I got rejected, but I certainly learned how rejection was not painful.
Sure.
Going door to door for 2 months in Houston, Texas, trying to sell dictionaries and Bibles.
Ooh, all right. Great books for sure. Um, You touch a little bit upon the 2020 health crisis, but I really want to dive deeper into it because it seemed like it was a pivot towards purpose for you. Obviously, it wasn't just sort of a breakdown; it was a breakthrough, perhaps. And stripped away, I suppose, the noise and sort of awaken a calling that I think nobody could predict. Obviously, I didn't have the experience needed to predict it in the first place, but certainly you didn't either. So perhaps there was something sort of much bigger than anyone could sort of expect. And I quote you here because I found this great quote of you, which I think was great. But my illness was the greatest teacher I never asked for. It turned pain into purpose. Now, I think that's very beautiful. Can you walk us through the moment you realized that that crisis was not just physical, but it was also spiritual, mental, directional? Tell me more about how you felt at that time.
Yeah, it was very frightening because, like I said earlier, when they carried me out of here on a gurney and I saw the look in my wife's eyes, I knew it was pretty serious.
Sure.
And I literally thought that I would never return alive. But then we got into the emergency room on a Sunday evening, March 14th, 2020. They had determined that I did have a serious internal bleeding issue. They knew the medication I was on, and they knew that there was no antidote pharmacologically or organically to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was, in their eyes, I was just a fatality waiting to happen. And so it was pretty, and I didn't know all of that until a year later about how dangerous that medication was. But my wife stayed with me that whole evening till about 6 a.m. in the morning in the emergency room. And I said, look, go home. You need to rest. You've been up all night with me. She said, well, I'll run home, take a shower. I'll come back. Time she came back, they quarantined the hospital because it was COVID quarantine. And she couldn't get back in. So here I was alone and, pretty much bleeding to death. And I had a very fervent prayer by a nurse who knew how dangerous my situation was. And she prayed for me very fervently. And in the middle of the night that night, the bleeding stopped. And the only answer I've got, Sam, is the good Lord above stopped the bleeding. That's the only answer I've got. And so during that time that I was alone, because even after it stopped, they were putting me through a series of tests, I had countless hours of just thinking, how did I get here? What did I do? And what were the decisions I made that put me in this situation? And once I was granted a second chance, I realized that I better do better this time around.
Mm.
And I had to take some steps to do better, not only with my health, with my life, and with my my faith in God, because I had pretty much put him on the back burner and let an obsession with a business I created that became highly lucrative. That not only did COVID take that away from me after 17, 18 years of highly successful, wonderful income and incredible customers. Not only did COVID take that away, but, obviously almost lost it all because of my abusing my health the way that I had done. So
Sure.
I came to grips with the reality that I can't continue this way. And now that I've got a second chance, even now I was 67 at the time, I just turned 72 this past Wednesday. And I feel like that I have more passion, more purpose, and more meaningful things to offer the world than I've ever had. And, when you think about this, even though, I taught a lot of amazing children how to play music, and some of them really thrived and became professionals even. That was wonderful. But to be able to guide someone who may be just living a mediocre health life, not ill, not in crisis, but they're just living a mediocre life, to not only go from mediocre to thriving, but then also those who are having some challenges or are in a crisis, help them remedy that as well. I mean, you can't put a price on that.
Correct. I think that out of difficulties grow miracles, right? And it's something that we, through faith, through believing of all kinds. You mentioned, Mike, I realized that I needed to take this step that was necessary to change my life, my spirituality with God. Tell me more about those steps. What does it look like concretely to hit rock bottom and get back up, perhaps in a meaningful fashion?
Yeah, it means that first thing every morning, I'm in 1 hour in a Bible study, and reading the Bible. My wife and I do that from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. every day. That's and it's those daily disciplines.
Yes.
That Jim Rohn speaks so much about, the daily disciplines. And so that's every morning, our life. And I've grown to appreciate not only my walk with God, but the many blessings that he's given me. I have a gratitude journal on my desk that every day I write down the 6 or 7 things that I'm grateful for. And number one every day is another day of life.
Day of life.
Yeah, another day of life, because there might not be a tomorrow, but so today I'm grateful that I have this day. And I have to be honest with you, I went through, I was kind of a mind dumb robot, really, successful, highly successful. I mean, had a huge business, a high income, but I was just going through the motions and had it on autopilot, and probably ignored my wife to a degree. And then when I was in some of my alcoholic binges, I probably abused her as well. And
Interesting.
So that has stopped, and we have the most amazing relationship now. And I mean, we're always surprising one another. She gave me the most incredible birthday this year. And today at golf, she said, "You know what I want for my birthday?" I said, "Whatever you want." She said, "I'd just like to go to the beach for a couple of days." So next Friday's her birthday, so we'll be at Clearwater Beach next weekend.
Very nice. What's her name?
Anna.
Well, happy birthday in advance, Anna. If you're looking at this and or listening to it, perhaps. One of the resource that I took a look at, Mike, prior to this interview was Hardcore, right? The Power of Forgiveness. The book you read, obviously, the book you wrote. Excuse me, I read, you wrote it, and which is, I suppose, from my perspective at least, really was sort of a display of putting your soul on paper, which I thought was a very emotional book, very, very emotional book, which I recommend anyone obviously take a look at it. And the courage to forgive yourself, forgive others. And when the pain is personal, obviously, it's one of the rarest form of strength. We all go through these very, very sort of bottom moments, but if you don't have the courage to forgive, one, nobody else will do it for you, but second of all, you become your own enemy at that point, which is the worst thing possible. Why did you feel it was time to write Hardcore, perhaps? Why and why at that moment, I suppose?
Yeah, it's been amazing since going through what I went through in 2020. Seems like every month or every couple of months, I have some epiphanies, and they're normally in the shower.
Sure.
the cover of that book came to me in a vision in the shower one. I thought, how can I tie in growing up on an apple farm and the pain of, that, so the partially eaten apple core is like, the the unhealthy relationship that represents that unhealthy relationship between my father and my mother to a degree. But one of the things that Anna had recommended many years ago, she said, look, you keep telling people these stories. Why don't you just write it in a book? And I just didn't think I could write a book. And that was growing up dyslexic. I had a real issue with reading and writing. I mean, it was interesting. When I went to college my freshman year, you have to take English Comp 101 in the U.S. colleges. And the English teacher came up to me and she said, when I speak to you and you converse with me, you sound intelligent. But when you turn in your written assignments, it's like you're not very smart. So there must be something going on. So it wasn't until I was almost 19 years old that I discovered I was dyslexic. And so I had a real problem with that. But throughout my whole life, I had trouble. I could speak my thoughts, but I couldn't write them down. So that was one of the reasons I kept putting it off. But I had an inspiration again in the shower to do the book. And the most interesting thing about the book, last spring, when it was ready to go to print, my wife asked me this question. She says, what do you want to offer the readers of this book? I said, well, hopefully the main lesson they will learn is that no matter what you have gone through, no matter what hardships, emotionally, physically, financially you've experienced, you can survive those and you can thrive on the end, in the end. She said, well, that's good. And she said, well, I got one more question for you. Have you ever really totally forgiven your parents? And Sam, that question hit me like a ton of bricks, because the reality was I had not totally forgiven both of them, or either of them. So about a week after she and I had that conversation, I was doing an interview on my podcast with a gentleman named Brian Johnson. He is a master NLP certified coach. And we did the interview, and as he was a guest on my podcast, and he said, Mike, what's going on with you? And I said, what do you mean? He said, there's something going on with you. He said, I can pick it up emotionally. He said, but I see it. He said, your shoulders are like this. He goes, like that. And I looked in the camera and I go, you gosh, he's right. He said, what's going on? I said, well, let me just share this story. And he said, okay. He said, we'll finish this. We'll end this podcast. You can save the recording. And he said, then we're going to start a new recording. And I want to take you through a forgiveness exercise through my NLP training. And we did. And there were some head motions and some affirmations I did. And he said, okay, that's my treat to you because you need it. And so he said, here's your assignment. Do this 3 times a week for 1 month, and then reach back out to me and tell you what's going on. Well, I had the most sincere soul after doing that for a month. But not only that, Sam, my blood pressure went down 30 points.
Wow.
And it was a true forgiveness of my parents, but I had to get that through some physical things I was doing, with my head and all that. Brian has he's amazing. He's literally done NLP sessions with over 100,000 people in the last 25 years. Some major Hollywood stars and some major professional athletes he's worked with. And Mike Beverly.
That's right. That's right. On top of that list, obviously.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because there's this great quote, Louis Schmidt, if I'm not mistaken, something like that, talking about the fact that when you to forgive is to set a prisoner free, and to discover that the prisoner was you, perhaps. And it's a tough thing to understand prior to do it, but once you do it, like you said, your blood pressure goes down, your stress level goes down, your quality of life goes up. Basically, that's the bottom line. You were just talking about the fact that you're finishing the healing divide and sort of bridging medical worlds. This is very interesting, and I definitely pick it up, by the way. And I recommend my audience to be ready for that official, basically, launch date to pick their own copy of it. But it's sort of there to tackle what many avoid, right? Which is the war between conventional medicine and holistic wellness, or I suppose that's maybe there's, and again, I didn't read the book, obviously it's not available yet, but I suppose there's a synergy between those two that might be something that people do not fully understand. And I think it's essential. I think in a world where the way life perhaps progress with technology and so on, the understanding of the roots medical, I suppose, ways in which you can heal yourself and others, I think will be one of the most spoken about topics in the next decade. Is my guess. But for you specifically, what led you to believe that bridging both of these worlds perhaps wasn't just possible, but it was a necessity? Tell me more about how it was, I suppose, clear cut on your mind that was next, perhaps for the medical world.
Yeah, it all came. I mean, a lot of it's come from my curiosity about healing and healing with natural and alternative modalities, but it also was motivated by the numerous stories of people. I mean, even one of my most impactful stories I heard was a gynecologist from Green Bay, Wisconsin, who was giving childbirth. And one of the gynecologists that worked in her gynecology practice that she started, she hired this younger doctor, and he had been in practice for 10 or 12 years. And now Dr. Monlock is giving birth. And she recognizes that something's going wrong in the process. And she says, we need to change this particular procedure. And this doctor, who the only way I can describe it was arrogant, would not listen to her. And she'd been practicing 25 years. He'd been practicing maybe 8 or 10, and he was attending the birth. And he would not listen to her. And I don't know if it was ego or arrogance or whatever, but she almost died. And she will be one of the stories in my third book, which will be coming out probably beginning of 26, which is a compendium of 25 stories of people like mine and hers who almost had a major situation or near-death situation because of arrogance, closed-mindedness, or just the protocols. That's one of the things I was editing yesterday, is that, sometimes traditional Western modern doctors, and like I said, I'm not condemning them, but sometimes they let protocols, studies, or a pigeonhole prescription protocol rule out overall and the feelings and rights and thoughts of the patient.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that ends up creating major challenges for the patient.
I'm sure it does. There seems to be a resistance to healing. That's how I understand it, right? There's a lot of people that don't want to be well, and it sounds like a harsh truth, but and maybe it is one, and or rather maybe best way to put it is that they're afraid of what healing would demand, and that's a big thing, and it's something with success. With very big comparison with success, there, everybody wants to be very successful, but there's only a few people that are willing to put the work that is necessary to be successful and healthy, or anything else perhaps. and healing is definitely part of that conversations. Now, from your perspective, why do you think so many resist alternative healing? And even when their current treatments ain't working, perhaps, where does that resistance comes from? Is it cultural? Is it societal? Where does it come from your perspective?
Well, one of the statements I have in the new book is that it's what's comfortable.
Yeah.
That has a lot to do with it. But another holistic healer I work with closely says that, hey, their illness and their infirmity is their identity, and a lot of times they do not want to lose that identity.
Correct.
It creates a lot of attention. It creates a lot of focus on them, even though it's painful and uncomfortable. But it is, she says that, and she's been doing this 25 years. I've only been working in this arena 5. And she says it's their identity. But I also say it's their comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's part of the resistance. There's so many. I have 17 chapters in the book, and they're all intertwined to go through. And one of them is comfort zone. One of them is, the second chapter is absolutely my favorite. It's called The Science of Skepticism. And there is a real science behind skepticism. And it has been bought and paid for by Big Pharma.
Interesting. Yeah, it's not just it's not just science. I think it's also it's psychology, it's belief. We know how effective the placebo effect is, right? That's exactly why. Is because your mind is way stronger than you think. So if you're condemned from your own identity, perhaps even if I found you solutions, if you don't want it, perhaps nobody can help that. I think we've been knowing that for thousands of years, but it's always interesting to remind you of such things. One thing that you talk at great length about, Mike, which I want to touch upon, is the body as a teacher, right? Wellness from within. And obviously, as you moved from coaching music to coaching bodies and minds, you see wellness as more than just a checklist. I think everybody should see wellness as more than a checklist. It's not just about drink 2 liters of water a day and eat protein and so on. Those are all great, but the relationship with oneself is something that I think is very sacred, something that we're losing, unfortunately, in my opinion, in a performance-first Western world. And there was this great Jim Rohn quote, of all people. You mentioned him prior to this. One of my favorites, basically a mentor, indirect mentor, I call them. But take care of your body because it's the only place you have to live, right? Simple as that. And so from your perspective, what are the first signs you encourage people to listen to when their body is trying to speak to them? What's those first early signs that you can pick up if everybody at home basically trying to follow along this wellness journey?
Yeah, if one of the most common ones is if you, over a period of 2-3 days, just feel like that your energy level is not there, or if your focus is not there, there's multiple signs. But I always judge my personal one by how do I feel today compared to the last 5? And if I feel like I'm sluggish, or if I feel like that, my focus is not there, then I have to look and see, did I not sleep well? Did I not hydrate well? Because there are days when I don't, do the things that I should do, and I can tell it the next day. I really can. But it's your body is speaking to you every moment of every day. However, one of the things that is harmful, I think, to a lot of people and to society in general is that if they're taking, and here's an example. I went in for my 6-month checkup a couple weeks ago at the doctor's office. A lady checking in front of me had a giant Ziploc bag, and I literally counted the bottles of the pills that she was taking. How many do you think she had in that giant Ziploc bag, Sam?
How was that for? Was that for a day, for a month, for?
No, that's her daily. That's her daily.
Okay, that's a daily.
Yeah, because the doctors require you when you first go to them to bring in your pills.
Yeah, sure. 12.
13.
Oh, it was not too bad.
13. 13. So how can the mind literally function in a completely rational way if you're being drugged with that many drugs every day? And I had an interview on my podcast, or a guest on my podcast, who used to be a major researcher at a major medical school here in the United States. And he told me the name of the medical school, but I could not mention it on the podcast just because he's no longer there and he had to sign some agreements once he left. But he said, we discovered that the average 50-year and older in the United States is on, and he asked me the question, how many do you think they're on average? Now, this includes people that don't take any, people that take a lot more, but on average, he said, Mike, how many do you think the average 50-plus-year-old in the United States takes on a daily basis?
My guess would be 4.
I guess 10. He said, you're the closest person that I've asked that question to. I said, well, what is the real answer? He said, 14.
No way.
14. 14.
So that lady with 13, she's below average in America over 50.
Yeah. Yeah. And he says, and the bottom line is the actuaries for the pharmaceutical companies know that they have to have people that age and older on that many so that they can be highly profitable.
Yeah. It makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah. But how can people even experience their own life and their own bodies when they're taking that many medications? They can't.
No, they can. Absolutely can. No, it's interesting. It's so incredible. I think we face the same crisis in Canada, by the way, specifically in Quebec. I don't know the exact stats, but I know that Quebec is by far the province which we gave most medications to, specifically our youth, but it's probably the case for all ages. From your perspective, I suppose your point is that we give way too much pills to people that could perhaps help heal themselves with other techniques. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's, I've got a friend I went to high school with who, when I first started working with him and sharing some technologies with our Worldwide Cellular Health team, he was on 10 3.5 years ago. Now he's on none. And living a much higher quality of life, more cognizant, more in tune with the world than he's probably ever been. And it's amazing. In my book, I cite another statistic that the National Institute of Health here cites that over 60% of Americans are dealing with chronic diseases. Autoimmune diseases, lupus, fibromyalgia, all of that. And a lot of it's probably coming from poor lifestyle, but a lot of it's coming probably from the genetically modified foods that, we're promulgating here in the United States. And I think Europe, I got to applaud them. They have taken a lot of the food dyes and all the chemicals out. So I think they're dealing with that a lot better than we here in North America are.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think it is. It's a big topic, but obviously, as we know, unfortunately, very, very few pharma companies own the whole market. So they own basically the food you eat. They own the hospital, basically, in which you get basically healed into as well. So that's that circle for them. And I said it on a previous podcast, but it's completely true. For them, a healthy person is a lost customer, and therefore, how much do they have perhaps to win with making you truly healthy and I suppose living a meaningful life? That's highly debatable. I think we should we should put them accountable for sure. We see so many now case studies where you take basically a food that is served or that is basically sold in American grocery stores, and there's so many chemicals in it that it wouldn't even, half of it would not even be able to be sold in Europe because of how, like you said, the tie-dye, all the chemicals they put into the food, what makes us sick and makes them be able to produce them cheaper and therefore increase their margins and so on. There's big economics behind all of that we need to certainly keep in mind. I want to, you just mentioned about, obviously, you're an author now, a multiple author, and in authoring your own transformation seems to be sort of a major quest of yours, right? It's because books, and I love books so much. I pretty much, I'm either working out, sleeping, or reading books. That's pretty much all I do in life. And but it, for you, they seem to serve as legacies, right? And taking your own life wounds and turn them into manuals and for resilience, perhaps. And really, that takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of humility. Hats off to you, basically, to do that, to inspire others to do the same thing. But from your perspective, Mike, what did writing teach you about yourself, and how did you decide? How do you decide what to include, what to not include? Also, that's always a question I love to ask authors, because we know it's simple, quote unquote, to just write and write, but writing something concisely, reading, that's very difficult. Tell me more about your process there and what that taught you about yourself.
Well, the hardcore came because I'd procrastinated because I knew a lot of that was going to be painful. So on my birthday in 2022, my 69th birthday, I sat down that morning at 7 a.m. and at 2 p.m. my wife came in and said, "Hey, Mike, what are you doing? You're not cleaned up." And I go, "No, what time is it?" She said, "It's 2 o'clock." So for 7 hours straight, I had just typed, and I'd taken maybe 1 or 2 bathroom breaks, but other than that, it was just a constant flow, because it just flowed out of me from my earliest memory of growing up on my grandfather's farm. And you read that story about my first memory was, going down my grandfather's lane when the old farm dog came and knocked me down, so it just flowed out of me. I had no outline. I just said, okay, here it is. And then, so I kind of reverse engineered it. I found a developmental editor after I got about 40,000 words on the page, and I found a developmental editor, and she helped me hone it down and put it in that story form that you read. And so now I know that you have to have an outline. You start with a theme, and so when the thought for the healing divide came along, my thought was, I want to offer something that isn't too science geeky for the average person, who is not even considered. I mean, I have a true friend I just love, and he will not even think about anything that's natural, holistic, or homeopathic. He will not even consider it. And the bottom line is, I'm empathetic with him because, for all intents and purposes, I was that way too for a long time. So my purpose in the Healing Divide is to offer an easy to read book that is, again, not too sciencey, not too geeky, that people can go, oh yeah, well maybe I should consider this, and maybe I have been affected by that. So that was the purpose of this. And so now, and the hardest part has been the last few months is pulling it all together so it's a cohesive read. And and I've read it several times, obviously, but it's that. But I think it will impact people who are lay people. They've never ever thought that there was a natural healing path for them. And I think if people will buy this book and read it, they will see that there might be some other options for themselves.
Beautiful. I want to talk to you about the vision forwards, right? For what's next for you, and most importantly, I suppose, well, as importantly, what's next for wellness as well. I've been having a lot of conversation, Mike, with wellness experts. Some think technology is a fantastic thing, and it will make obviously the barrier to entry in wellness so much lower, and it's going to do beautiful things. Some people are more skeptical. From your perspective, looking, let's say 5 years ahead from now, what do you think the wellness, personal in this case, wellness will look like? Do you think would it be better? What do you think will be, I suppose, what differences would it be made from a Western perspective to maybe having a better harmony with alternative medicine? Where's your mind going when you think about what the future of wellness holds for us?
I think it is, we're just on the prefaces of an explosion in natural and holistic and alternative wellness. And a part of that is, I think there's been a great awakening since COVID, because of what we all went through for that, and also the aftermath of the protocols that were not only recommended, but in some cases forced on people around the globe. And the aftermath of that, it has, I think, opened up a lot of people's eyes to the alternatives. But then when you see, I mean, I've interviewed at least a dozen traditional Western medicine doctors, one here in Florida who was a traditional MD for 25 years. And she said, Mike, I made lots of money. And the more script pads I filled out, the more money I made. And she said, but literally after 25 years of doing it, I can count on two hands the number of patients who I felt truly that I impacted their health in a positive way. She said, every single one of them, 90% of them would come back for more scripts. And she said, that's when I decided to stop. She actually went to, I think, Canada and spent 2 years learning and getting certified in functional medicine. And now she will only write a script if it's an emergency. So it's truly amazing. But Dr. Zach Bush, I don't know if you've heard that name.
Nope.
He's renowned in the world for natural and holistic wellness. But he was a traditional Western medicine doctor for a couple of decades. And he came to the conclusion that what he was doing was not health care. It was sick care.
Yeah, I heard that one.
And he said, I'm tired of participating in sick care. So now he travels around the world speaking to people, and the redox signaling molecules that you and I discussed, and that's how Hillary and I met, and she became a big proponent of it. He says that redox signaling molecules is the greatest health science discovery in history. There are a lot of medical professionals will say it's the greatest discovery of our lifetime. Dr. Zach Bush goes on to say in history. And the National Institute of Health in the United States has been studying it for 50 years. They've known the power of the redox signaling molecules to heal every human body and to put every human body in such a vitally healing state that we can operate optimally. But they've been hiding their research. But now there's some legal filings that have been made where they're going to have to make that research known. So I predict that a lot of technologies like redox and others are going to be a household name. And here's an example. How long do you think it took the average household to accept a vitamin C?
So by how long you mean from the time we discovered it was beneficial to?
Yes, till it was totally accepted.
It's for sure a few decades. I would say, let's say 34 years.
40 years.
40 years.
40 years. So even though people are going to know that one of the major technologies that I offer people for healing, natural healing, is redox signaling, it will be a name, but it'll take a while for it to be accepted.
Yeah. Yeah. Great things takes time, Mike. Great thing takes time, right? That's what they say. That's what they say. What do you think? So from Redux, from all the books you have and so on, what do you, I suppose, hope and wish your impact would be from from your personal story and everything that you're putting your efforts into? What does that legacy look like, you think? Obviously, I think you will never retire. You seem to be one of these guys that will just do it until they cannot anymore. So, so tell me more about what you hope for the listeners and the people you're impacted could be left with.
Well, I hope they're left with some hope that they can heal and that they can live a vital life. I mean, I'm 72, and when you regarding retirement, people ask me all the time, when are you going to retire, Mike? I mean, some of my teacher friends that have retired, they'll say, Mike, you're still going strong. Like, when are you going to retire or slow down? I go, well, I'll tell you what, can I give you just the honest answer? The honest answer is I'll think about retiring when I'm 95. How's that? And some of them laugh at me or say I'm crazy, and some people get mad.
Oh, wow. Is that right?
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful. I think it's incredible. Go Mike is what I think, for sure.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is, we were discussing this Friday. I was at a wellness expo and talking to several friends in our wellness space. And one gentleman said, retirement was really a concept that was a con job sold to, it started, I think, in Germany. But then it's been sold to the world society that you got to retire, got to work 40 years, and then retire, slow down, and do nothing. Well, no, if you're not contributing, and here's an example. My wife and I live 5 miles from one of the largest retirement communities in the world called the Villages.
Okay.
In Florida. And, we meet a few nice people there, but there are a lot of unhappy people we see.
Oh, exactly. I think, I don't know, recall the exact stats, but I'm pretty sure retirement's killed more people than we can even fathom. I think that's when you lose your purpose, you lose your soul. And by losing your soul, you perhaps get cynical about life. I think I agree. And look, I'm on the other side of that story at the beginning of mine, but I sure hope to find my lane to a point where I never think about retiring and helping others until the very last day that I die. So I really honor that. And Mr. Mike Beverly, was an absolute pleasure to have you on the Meaningful Podcast. Thank you for your honesty, for sharing so much nuggets of wisdom as well with our audience. It's always much, much, much appreciated. And I would love if you can leave our audience with some last words of wisdom, please.
I would just leave your audience with this. Live like there's no tomorrow. And live every moment. Be grateful that you have these moments, because there's nothing guaranteed. And by all means, keep an open mind.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.